But do me a favor, Grace. Don't say anything about a shark to Sally. It's bad enough as it is. All right, Martin. Wait. Wait a minute. She covered the mouthpiece of the phone with her hand, and Brody heard some muffled conversation. Then Sally Gardner came on the line. Why did you do it, Martin? Do what? Apparently, Grace Finley tried to take the phone from her hand, for Brody heard Sally say, "Let me speak, damn you." Then she said to him, "Why did you send him? Why Ben?" Her voice wasn't particularly loud, but she spoke with an intensity that struck Brody as hard as if she were yelling. "Sally, you're—" "This didn't have to happen," she said. "You could have stopped it." Brody wanted to hang up. He didn't want a repetition of the scene with the Kintner boy's mother. But he had to defend himself. She had to know that it wasn't his fault. How could she blame him? He said, "Crap. Ben was a fisherman, a good one. He knew the risks. If you hadn't—" "Stop it, Sally." Brody let himself stamp on her words. "Try to get some rest." He hung up the phone. He was furious, but his fury was confused. He was angry at Sally Gardner for accusing him, and angry at himself for being angry at her. If, she had said. If what? If he had not sent Ben. Sure. And if pigs had wings they'd be eagles. If he had gone himself. But that wasn't his trade. He had sent the expert. He looked up at Meadows. "You heard." "Not all of it, but enough to gather that Ben Gardner has become victim number 4. Brody nodded. "I think so." He told Meadows and Hooper about his trip with Hendricks. Once or twice, Meadows interrupted with a question. Hooper listened, his angular face placid and his eyes alight, powder blue fixed on Brody. At the end of his tale, Brody reached into his pants pocket. "We found this," he said. "Leonard dug it out of the wood." He flipped the tooth to Hooper, who turned it over in his hand. "What do you think, Matt?" said Meadows. "It's a white." "How big?" "I can't be sure, but big. 15, 20 feet. That's some fantastic fish." He looked at Meadows. "Thanks for calling me," he said. "I could spend a whole lifetime around sharks and never see a fish like that." Brody asked, "How much would a fish like that weigh?" 5 or 6,000 pounds. Brody whistled. 3 tons. "Do you have any thoughts about what happened?" Meadows asked. "From what the chief says, it sounds like the fish killed Mr. Gardner." "How?" said Brody. "Any number of ways. Gardner might have fallen overboard. More likely, he was pulled over. His leg may have gotten tangled in a harpoon line. He could even have been taken while he was leaning over the stern." "How do you account for the teeth in the stern?" "The fish attacked the boat." "What the hell for?" "Sharks aren't very bright, Chief. They exist on instinct and impulse. The impulse to feed is powerful. But a 30-foot boat. A shark doesn't think." To him it wasn't a boat. It was just something large. "And inedible." "Not till he'd tried it. You have to understand. There's nothing in the sea this fish would fear." "Other fish run from bigger things." "That's their instinct. But this fish doesn't run from anything. He doesn't know fear. He might be cautious, say, around an even bigger white. But fear no way." "What else do they attack?" "Anything." "Just like that." "Anything." "Pretty much, yes." "Do you have any idea why he's hung around here so long?" said Brody. "I don't know how much you know about the water here, but I grew up here." "You did? In Amity?" "No, Southampton." "I spent every summer there, from grade school through grad school." "Every summer." "So you didn't really grow up there?" Brody was groping for something with which to re-establish his parity with, if not superiority to, the younger man, and what he settled for was reverse snobism, an attitude not uncommon to year-round residents of resort communities. It gave them armor against the contempt they sensed radiating from the rich summer folk. It was an I'm all right, Jack attitude, a social machismo that equated wealth with effeteness, simplicity with goodness, and poverty, up to a point, with honesty. And it was an attitude that, in general, Brody found both repugnant and silly. But he had felt threatened by the younger man, he wasn't really sure why, and the sensation was so alien that he had reached for the most convenient carapace, the one Hooper had handed him. "You're picking nits," Hooper said testily. "Okay, so I wasn't born here. But I've spent a lot of time in these waters, and I wrote a paper on this coastline. Anyway, I know what you're getting at, and you're right. This shoreline isn't an environment that would normally support a long stay by a shark. So why is this one staying? It's impossible to say. It's definitely uncharacteristic, but sharks do so many uncharacteristic things that the erratic becomes the normal. Anyone who'd risk money, not to mention his life, on a prediction about what one big shark will do in a given situation is a fool. This shark could be sick. The patterns of his life are so beyond his control that damage to one small mechanism could cause him to disorient and behave strangely. If this is how he acts when he's sick, said Brody, I'd hate to see what he does when he's feeling fine. No. Personally, I don't think he's sick. There are other things that could cause him to stay here, many of them things we'll never understand, natural factors, caprices. Like what? Changes in water temperature or current flow or feeding patterns. As food supplies move, so do the predators. A few summers ago, for example, a completely inexplicable phenomenon took place off the shore of parts of Connecticut and Rhode Island. The whole coastline was suddenly inundated with menhaden. Fishermen call them bunker. Huge schools. Millions of fish. They coated the water like an oil slick. There were so many that you could throw a bare hook in the water and reel it in, and more often than not you'd catch a menhaden by foul hooking it. Bluefish and bass feed on menhaden, so all of a sudden there were masses of bluefish feeding in schools right off the beaches. In Watch Hill, Rhode Island, people were wading into the surf and catching bluefish with rakes. Garden rakes. Just shoveling the fish out of the water. Then the big predators came, big tuna. Or 500–600 pounds. Deep-sea fishing boats were catching bluefin tuna within 100 yards of the shore. In harbors sometimes. Then suddenly it stopped. The menhaden went away, and so did the other fish. I spent 3 weeks down there trying to figure out what was going on. I still don't know. It's all part of the ecological balance. When something tips too far one way or the other, peculiar things happen. But this is even weirder, said Brody. This fish has stayed in one place, in one chunk of water only a mile or two square, for over a week. He hasn't moved up or down the beach. He hasn't touched anybody in East Hampton or Southampton. What is it about Amity? I don't know. I doubt that anyone could give you a good answer. Meadows said, Minnie Eldridge has the answer. Balls, said Brody. Who's Minnie Eldridge? Asked Hooper. The postmistress, said Brody. She says it's God's will, or something like that. We're being punished for our sins. Hooper smiled. Right now, anyway, that's as good an answer as I've got. That's encouraging, said Brody. Is there anything you plan to do to get an answer? There are a few things. I'll take water samples here and in East Hampton. I'll try to find out how other fish are behaving, if anything extraordinary is around, or if anything that should be here isn't. And I'll try to find that shark. Which reminds me, is there a boat available? Yes, I'm sorry to say, said Brody. Ben Gardner's. We'll get you out to it tomorrow, and you can use it at least until we work something out with his wife. Do you really think you can catch that fish, after what happened to Ben Gardner? I didn't say I was going to try to catch it. I don't think I'd want to try that. Not alone, anyway. Then what the hell are you going to do? I don't know. I'll have to play it by ear. Brody looked into Hooper's eyes and said, I want that fish killed. If you can't do it, we'll find someone who can. Hooper laughed. You sound like a mobster. I want that fish killed. So go get a contract out on him. Who are you going to get to do the job? I don't know. What about it, Harry? You're supposed to know everything that goes on around here. Isn't there any fisherman on this whole damn island equipped to catch big sharks? Meadows thought for a moment before he spoke. There may be one. I don't know much about him, but I think his name is Kint, and I think he operates out of a private pier somewhere around Promised Land. I can find out a little more about him if you like. Why not? Said Brody. He sounds like a possible. Hooper said, Look, Chief, you can't go off half-cocked looking for vengeance against a fish. That shark isn't evil. It's not a murderer. It's just obeying its own instincts. Trying to get retribution against a fish is crazy. Listen, you. Brody was growing angry, an anger born of frustration and humiliation. He knew Hooper was right, but he felt that right and wrong were irrelevant to the situation. The fish was an enemy. It had come upon the community and killed 2 men, a woman, and a child. The people of Amity would demand the death of the fish. They would need to see it dead before they could feel secure enough to resume their normal lives. Most of all, Brody needed it dead, for the death of the fish would be a catharsis for him. Hooper had touched that nerve, and that infuriated Brody further. But he swallowed his rage and said, Forget it. The phone rang. It's for you, Chief, said Clements. Mr. Vaughan. Oh, swell. That's just what I need. He punched the flashing button on the phone and picked up the receiver. Yeah, Larry. Hello, Martin. How are you? Vaughan's voice was friendly, almost effusively so. Brody thought, he's probably had a couple of belts. As well as could be expected, Larry. You're working pretty late. I tried to get you at home. Yeah. Well, when you're the chief of police and your constituents are getting themselves killed every 20 minutes, that kind of keeps you busy. I heard about Ben Gardner. What did you hear? That he was missing. News travels pretty fast. Are you sure it was the shark again? Sure. Yeah, I guess so. Nothing else seems to make any sense. Martin, what are you going to do? There was a pathetic urgency in Vaughan's voice. That's a good question, Larry. We're doing everything we can right now. We've got the beaches closed down. I'm aware of that, to say the very least. What's that supposed to mean? Have you ever tried to sell healthy people real estate in a leper colony? No, Larry, Brody said wearily. I'm getting cancellations every day. People are walking out on leases. I haven't had a new customer in here since Sunday. So what do you want me to do? Well, what I'm wondering is, maybe we're overreacting to this whole thing. You're kidding. Tell me you're kidding. Hardly. Martin. Now calm down. Let's discuss this rationally. I'm rational. I'm not sure about you, though. There was a moment of silence, and then Vaughan said, What would you say to opening the beaches, just for the 4th of July weekend? Not a chance. Not a fucking chance. Now listen. No, you listen, Larry. The last time I listened to you, we had 2 people killed. If we catch that fish, if we kill the sonofabich, then we'll open the beaches. Until then, forget it. What about nets? What about them? Why couldn't we put steel nets out to protect the beaches? Someone told me that's what they do in Australia. He must be drunk, Brody thought. Larry, this is a straight coastline. Are you going to put nets out along 2.5 miles of beaches? Fine. You get the money. I'd say about $1 million, for openers. What about patrols? We could hire people to patrol up and down the beaches in boats. That's not good enough, Larry. What is it with you, anyway? Are your partners on your ass again? That's none of your damn business, Martin. For God's sake, man, this town is dying. I know it, Larry, Brody said softly. And as far as I know, there's not a damn thing we can do about it. Good night. He hung up the phone. Meadows and Hooper rose to leave. Brody walked them to the front door of the station house. As they started out the door, Brody said to Meadows, "Hey, Harry, you left your lighter inside." Meadows started to say something, but Brody stepped on his words. "Come on back inside and I'll give it to you. If you leave it around here overnight, it's likely to disappear." He waved to Hooper. "See you." When they were back in Brody's office, Meadows took his lighter from his pocket and said, "I trust you had something to say to me." Brody shut the door to his office. "You think you can find out something about Larry's partners?" "I guess so." "Why?" "Ever since this thing began, Larry has been on my ass to keep the beaches open. And now, after all that's just happened, he says he wants them open for the 4th. The other day he said he was under pressure from his partners. I told you about it. And I think we should know who it is who has enough clout to drive Larry bullshit. I wouldn't care if he wasn't the mayor of this town. But if there are people telling him what to do, I think we ought to know who they are." Meadows sighed. "Okay, Martin. I'll do what I can. But digging around in Larry Vaughan's affairs isn't my idea of fun. There's not a whole hell of a lot that is fun these days, is there?" Brody walked Meadows to the door, then went back to his desk and sat down. Vaughan had been right about one thing, he thought. Amity was showing all the signs of imminent death. It wasn't just the real estate market, though its sickness was as contagious as smallpox. Evelyn Bixby, the wife of one of Brody's officers, had lost her job as a real estate agent and was working as a waitress in a hash house on Route 27. 2 new boutiques that were scheduled to open the next day had put off their debuts until July 3rd, and the proprietors of both made a point of calling on Brody to tell him that if the beaches weren't open by then, they wouldn't open their stores at all. One of them was already looking at a site for rent in East Hampton. The sporting goods store had posted signs announcing a clearance sale, a sale that normally took place over the Labor Day weekend. The only good thing about the Amity economy, as far as Brody was concerned, was that Saxon's was doing so badly that it laid off Henry Kimball. Now that he didn't have his bartending job, he slept during the day and could occasionally survive through a shift of police work without a nap. Beginning on Monday morning, the first day the beaches were closed, Brody had posted 2 officers on the beaches. Together, they had had 17 confrontations with people who insisted on swimming. One was with a man named Robert Dexter, who claimed a constitutional right to swim off his own beach and who allowed his dog to terrorize the officer on duty, until the cop pulled his pistol and threatened to shoot the dog. Another dust-up took place on the public beach, when a New York lawyer started reading the United States Constitution to a policeman and a multitude of cheering youths. Still, Brody was convinced that so far, at least no one had gone swimming. On Wednesday, 2 kids had rented a skiff and rowed about 300 yards offshore, where they spent an hour ladling blood, chicken guts, and duck heads overboard. A passing fishing boat spotted them and called Brody via the marine operator. Brody called Hooper, and together they went in Flicker and towed the boys to shore. In the skiff, the boys had a flying gaff attached to 200 yards of clothesline, secured to the prow by a square knot. They said they planned to hook the shark with the gaff and go for a Nantucket sleigh ride. Brody told them that if they ever tried the stunt again, he'd arrest them for attempted suicide. There had been 4 reports of shark sightings. 1 had turned out to be a floating log. 2, according to the fishermen who followed up the reports, were schools of jumping bait fish. And 1, as far as anyone could tell, was a flat nothing. On Tuesday evening, just at dusk, Brody had received an anonymous phone call telling him that a man was dumping shark bait into the water off the public beach. It turned out to be not a man, but a woman dressed in a man's raincoat. Jessie Parker, one of the clerks at Walden's stationery store. At first she denied throwing anything into the water, but then she admitted that she had tossed a paper bag into the surf. It contained 3 empty vermouth bottles. "Why didn't you throw them in the garbage?" Brody had asked. "I didn't want the garbage man to think I'm a heavy drinker." "Then why didn't you throw them in someone else's garbage?" "That wouldn't be nice," she said. "Garbage is sort of private, don't you think?" Brody told her that from now on, she should take her empty bottles, put them in a plastic bag, put that bag in a brown paper bag.
We're about to see if these two antiperspirants can stand up to the heat.
Then smashed the bottles with a hammer until they were ground up. Nobody would ever know they had been bottles. Brody looked at his watch. It was after 9, too late to pay a visit to Sally Gardner. He hoped she was asleep. Maybe Grace Finley had given her a pill or a glass of whiskey to help her rest. Before he left the office, he called the Coast Guard station at Montauk and told the duty officer about Ben Gardner. The officer said he would dispatch a patrol boat at first light to search for the body. "Thanks," said Brody. "I hope you find it before it washes up." Brody was suddenly appalled at himself. It was Ben Gardner, a friend. What would Sally say if she heard Brody refer to her husband as it? 15 years of friendship wiped out, forgotten. There was no more Ben Gardner. There was only an it that should be found before it became a gory nuisance. "We'll try," said the officer. "Boy, I feel for you guys. You must be having a hell of a summer." "I only hope it isn't our last," said Brody. He hung up, turned out the light in his office, and walked out to his car. As he turned into his driveway, Brody saw the familiar blue-gray light shining from the living room windows. The boys were watching television. He walked through the front door, flipped off the outside light, and poked his head into the dark living room. The oldest boy, Billy, lay on the couch, leaning on an elbow. Martin, the middle son, aged 12, lounged in an easy chair, his shoeless feet propped up on the coffee table. 8-year-old Sean sat on the floor, his back against the couch, stroking a cat in his lap. "How goes it?" said Brody. "Good, Dad," said Bill, without shifting his gaze from the television. "Where's your mom?" "Upstairs. She said to tell you your dinner's in the kitchen." "Okay. Not too late, Sean, huh?" "It's almost 9:30. "Okay, Dad," said Sean. Brody went into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and took out a beer. The remains of the pot roast sat on the kitchen table in a roasting pan, surrounded by a scum of congealed gravy. The meat was brownish-grey and stringy. "Dinner," said Brody to himself. He checked the icebox for sandwich makings. There was some hamburger, a package of chicken legs, a dozen eggs, a jar of pickles, and 12 cans of soda pop. He found a piece of American cheese, dried and curled with age, and he folded it and popped it into his mouth. He debated heating up the pot roast, then said aloud, "The hell with it." He found 2 pieces of bread, spread mustard on them, took a carving knife from a magnetic board on the wall, and sliced a thick slab of roast. He dropped the meat on one of the pieces of bread, scattered a few pickles on top of it, covered it with the other piece of bread, and mashed the sandwich down with the heel of his hand. He put it on a plate, picked up his beer, and climbed the stairs to his bedroom. Ellen was sitting up in bed, reading Cosmopolitan. "Hello," she said. "A tough day." "You didn't say anything on the phone." "A tough day. That's about all we're having these days." "You heard about Ben Gardner?" "I wasn't really positive when I talked to you." He put the plate and the beer on the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed to remove his shoes. "Yes. I got a call from Grace Finley asking if I knew where Dr. Craig was. His service wouldn't say, and Grace wanted to give Sally a sedative." "Did you find him?" "No. But I had one of the boys take some Seconal over to her." "What's Seconal?" "Sleeping pills." "I didn't know you were taking sleeping pills." "I don't, often. Just every now and then." "Where did you get them?" "From Dr. Craig, when I went to him last time about my nerves. I told you." "Oh." Brody tossed his shoes into a corner, stood up, and took off his trousers, which he folded neatly over the back of a chair. He took off his shirt, put it on a hanger, and hung it in the closet. In t-shirt and undershorts, he sat down on the bed and began to eat his sandwich. The meat was dry and flaky. All he could taste was mustard. "Didn't you find the roast?" said Ellen. Brody's mouth was full, so he nodded. "What's that you're eating, then?" He